So one question we've been asked a number of times is, why didn't you just buy batteries? Why did you buy cells to put in and not just go buy commercially available batteries?
I'm Jerry.
I'm Sean, and this is our not currently sailing catamaran, Rome. We've taken on a huge refit involving every system on the boat, turning her into exactly what we want.
Let's jump back into the episode to see what project we're tackling this time.
Well, we're about ready to start building the battery box. And to do that, we've got to get some pretty specific dimensions. So lithium batteries need to be in a container that doesn't allow them to expand very much. So we've got to build the box to pretty tight tolerances. I'm not a cabinet maker, but I'm going to do the best I can and use some Sikaflex to fill in the outside and hopefully get the right spacing. So each of the batteries gets an epoxy spacer between the battery and anything else it touches to insulate it, basically, for friction and abrasion, to make sure that we're not wearing through. These are 1 millimeter thick. There's nothing to them, but there are enough of them that they do add up. So we'll have to take that into account when we're putting this together. So the outside dimension for these guys, and based on the way the batteries are going to go in, 2 across, 8 out, and this gives me, boy, it is just the tiniest bit light of 13 3/4. So if I plan that for 13 3/4, I'll probably be just fine. All right, so 8 of these cells gives us a 24 volt battery. These are 230 amp hour cells. So this would be a 230 amp hour, 24 volt battery. And then of course we'll double it up to give us 48 for the 48s. This gives us a measurement of, I'm going to call that 17 1/4. All right, so this gives us 13 3/4 by 17 1/4 for one 48 volt battery. We've got 4 of them. And then we've also got 2 24 volt batteries. We've got 90 inches on the long ways. Then the question becomes, how do we break this up to actually get it in the hole? Because we can't get 90 inches in here because the opening isn't big enough. So in addition to the base, we've also got to do the back and sides. So it's a height game. I'm going to go 8 1/8. All right, 150 cuts later, and we got pieces. Let's see how this fits. I only screwed up one of them, but I screwed it up enough that I have to do a little scabbing, which I don't love, but is what it is, right? Overall, this is a win. I'm getting after the battery installation, which starts out with, of course, a bunch of Sikaflex and gluing in the battery box pieces. The nice thing is that we don't really need that much Sika. We did a good job leveling the surface, and what we're looking for is just some adhesion. We put a few 100 pounds of batteries on this, and it really isn't going to take that much. All right, this should be just that simple. Okay, that's it. That's the first one. Now I'll flip around to the other side, and I'll get some weight on it to hold it in place while it sets. So we got the bases down for the battery boxes, and the next step is the back and ends. And I think to do that, we want to put a bunch of the batteries in place, and then drop the pieces in, and then I'll use the batteries to create the square. No matter what I do, I've got this backwards. I can't fucking figure out how to show it. It's perfect for me, but for the camera, it's just the back of this thing. The whole point today is to get these mounted with Sikaflex, and we use the batteries to make sure that they're square because the wall they're attaching to is not. This will be the first time we've loaded all the cells into the compartment. That's pretty exciting.
All right, last one.
Next step in our battery construction is to build out the arc protection. So between each of the cells and on the bottom, we have some GPO3 fiberglass. So it's a fiberglass composite and resin combination that's made for doing this kind of stuff. So this is designed to protect against arcing. It also is going to provide a friction barrier and protection for the cases of the batteries, because these guys, they literally are just covered in heat shrink, and it's an aluminum frame with the electrolyte inside it. And if this gets worn through and the two cells touch each other, they'll arc and create fire. We don't want fire. So we'll have some of this stuff between them, under them, on the sides. The whole thing will be covered. And it's also going to get some mylar for lubrication, really. And so we'll get into that. So we're going to do some measuring, some cutting, and see if we can get this moved forward. All right, so we need 89 inches of this to cover the bottom. You know what I know?
Just gotta lay it out.
If I don't just lay it out, I'm going to measure 3 times and still can cut it wrong.
How many more do we need?
Let's make 16.
7, 8, 4.
We've got basically 3 thicknesses, right? We have these guys, the base is a 1/16 of an inch, this is a 32nd of an inch, and this is 1/2 millimeter, because we have to use mixed units.
Of course.
Maybe what we should do is cut these to their height before we start doing this, so we've got pieces that make sense to work with.
Well, and so that we can like see what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. All right.
I think that's a great idea.
Great. This is all of the pieces we need to assemble the battery tie-down system. ABYC, in their wisdom, requires that boats have a method of keeping the batteries where they belong and not being able to move. The specific requirement is that if impacted with 90 pounds of force, they cannot move more than 1 inch in any direction, or twice their weight for 30 minutes can't move if they're pushed on. Basically, we're trying to avoid a fire. And in our scenario, we're trying to avoid a fire if the boat turns upside down. Because once they're installed, they cannot move left, right, front, or back at all because of the bulkheads. They just can't. And so the only way they can move is up. The boat doesn't have enough vertical acceleration, deceleration to cause them to bounce and fly because they're too heavy. And so the only scenario we're protecting for is in the event the boat turns upside down and then the batteries can't fall and arc and catch fire while we're leaving the boat. All right. All right. So I'm not putting foam down. I'm not putting any of the insulation down. We're measuring this as if the batteries are a couple millimeters low so that when we put the caps in, it holds them down. So I need some batteries. Alright, now to get the strength that we need pieces that go across this way, and these guys are reinforced with fiberglass. Is this one of the short ones, or is this a long one?
No, that's the long one. You want a short one?
Yep, let's have a short. Well, let me have the long one first.
Okay.
Yeah, the front.
Back wall.
Front wall.
Front wall.
I know.
It's the back of the compartment, but the front of the boat.
Right.
Oh, so complicated.
So that is what we have. Well, as we move forward with the electrical installation and the batteries, we get to pull out a new toy. And this is BMS time. We have to have a way to manage all of these batteries and these cells. And this fancy little piece of kit will allow us to put all the cells in each string in series and operate them safely. We're working on mounting. How do we mount this inside? Because there are no mounts on this. It's a really nice smooth case with no way to mount it. So I got busy with a 3D printer and downloaded a file that somebody else made, and I'm going to give it a try and see how it works. So these pieces look exactly the same, but they're not. So that should be the narrow gap. And that should be the wider gap. These BMSs, though, do have active balancing. So they'll do 2 amps per cell in active balancing across each of the strings. Each of these is connected to 16 cells, and they're managing the voltage across the 16 cells to ensure that they're really close to each other. And really close is within 5 to 10 millivolts each. So across the 16 cells, we don't want to see a spread more than 5 to 10 millivolts, preferably in the 5 range. And so the keys here that we really were focusing on is making sure that electrically each battery has the same resistance or impedance from the Lynx bus bar. And so electrically, battery 1 looks exactly the same as battery 2, looks exactly the same as battery 3, exactly the same as battery 4. So their charge or their current, or all 4 batteries running pretty much the same level all the time and don't have to worry about keeping them balanced so much. All right, so to make all of this work, we need something that's pretty clean. But for the 24s, we have 2 groups of batteries. Each one gets a Class T fuse. And the Class T fuse is the first thing that the battery connects to. And from the Class T, we need to go to a switch, and that's what these contactors are for, and then to a bus bar where we're going to combine the 24 volt capacity back to the Lynx distribution. To keep this as clean as possible, I'm going to run a cable to the Class T fuses. And from the Class T fuses, I would really like to run a bus bar from the Class T to the contactor. So what we can get started with is kind of understanding how this lays out. I could mount the Class T's on this rail that we put in for the battery hold down, and this line right here lines up directly with the positive stud on the battery. And so that's a good start. If I did that, the contactor could attach right there. And then it becomes a question of where do I attach this bus bar to make it work? Maybe I swap this bus bar out for a 3-position bus bar. That would be smaller and might fit right in there just exactly the way I want. Maybe I could do that. That might be the solution.
I don't know why, but the whole wire crimping process is somewhat satisfying.
Well, the wires get to remain a mess, but we've got our big bus bar for the 24 volt, and we're ready to put the Link bus bars in, and they'll slide on like so, and like so. So we've got about 8 millimeters of copper on these connecting bus bars, which is plenty for the cross-section value for the amount of current we're going to pull across them. And then this will provide power to the contactor, which is our on-off switch. And when it's on, that'll provide power to this bus bar. And then this will get a big lug and a 4-aught that runs back to the Lynx distribution in the utility room. But overall, I like the way this is coming together. So I'm going to get these pieces on and button it up. So this is probably one of the last times I get to sit in the battery compartment before it's full of batteries. And that's both kind of exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking. So let's go over what we've got in here and what all this does and what it means. So we have a 48 volt main battery systems, and that is comprised of 4 280 amp hour 48 volt lithium battery strings. And they're going to sit basically where I am and under my legs here. And they connect up to a big old Class T fuse down here, and we use the big Class T fuse to ensure that we have enough ampere interrupt capacity, because these 48 volt batteries can arc across on a regular smaller ANL or mega fuse. So we use a big Class T fuse on a big 600 amp hour bus bar, even though the maximum output of the batteries is going to be about 400 amps at a burst, 200 consistent. So we go through this Class T fuse holder. It's good for 600 amps with a 200 amp Class T fuse into a little stack of bus bars right here, into a switch, so an electric operated remote switch, or a contactor really to be more precise. They'll carry the full capacity of the battery without any problem at all. And this runs up, and each of these, to this point, they're exactly the same cable length, and then this cable on each of them is exactly the same length, and this runs up and connects up here to this big bus bar. And this bus bar supports the whole load and carries that back on this big 4-aught cable. It's actually a stack of 2 4-aught cables coming out of this bus bar, and that goes back to the links distribution in the battery room with all the Victron gear. There's a lot of wire that went in here. There's a lot of cable management that went in here. I'm trying really hard to be happy with the cable management, but I'm not super happy. It's not as tidy as I would really want, but given what we have and the space, it's impossible to get what I want. There's just no way to do it. And so it's as good as I can make it, and I'll go with that. So with all that, I think we're ready to start putting batteries in here. I'm gonna just sit here for a second and bask in my battery compartment, where I won't really get to do that ever again. And then we'll start loading stuff in.
So now that we've been living with this battery system for, I don't know, a month, something like that, I can answer the questions of why did we do it this way. Sean had 2 reasons. The first one is money. We saved probably $50,000 doing it this way. Could we have spent less? Sure, we could have spent less, but not to get the amount of power density and power storage that we have. So we saved an absolute bundle doing it this way. If you're considering it, DIY batteries are nothing to take lightly. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have some experience. You have to know what those amps and watts and volts mean and how they work together. I have no idea. That's why this project was all Sean. I was nothing but an extra pair of hands. Secondly, it's just all about space. We had a limited amount of space and a goal for the quantity of power density we could hold in it. And we could have spread out into another space, but we really didn't want to. So that was it. We were able to put so much more battery capacity into a relatively small space, and it all works great. My reason is that I didn't want to have to think about whether or not the hob was turned on, if I wanted to turn on the dishwasher or the microwave or the oven or anything else for that matter. When we started this journey, Sean promised me one thing. He said, you will not have to turn off one appliance to turn on another one. And he has absolutely 1,000% delivered on that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. It encourages YouTube to send our content out to a wider audience. And if you made it here to the very end, leave us an emoji. That way we can thank you personally. See you next time. Bye.